Before we dig in, a quick thank you to the sponsors ready to grow with the Soil Sisters. Tejas Tonic is the official beverage of the Texas Soil Sisters. We especially love that the hemp for Tejas Tonic is organically farmed in the Texas Hill Country, with farms in both Dripping Springs and Lukenbach, Texas. The Soil Sisters podcast is powered by B&P Electric. Whether you're building, remodeling, installing low-voltage landscape lighting, or in need of an inspection, B&P is your Central Texas electrical contractor. Find links to our sponsors in the podcast show notes or head over to txsoilsisters.co. You're listening to the Soil Sisters podcast, where we dig in on family farming and ranching, regenerative agriculture, healthy living, and planting seeds in our community. We invite you to listen, subscribe, and grow with the Soil Sisters. I'm Joanna Newting, joined by my blood, soul, and soil sister, Crystal, and our special guest, Greg Phillips. He is the co-founding partner of Phillips Kaiser, a Houston-based law firm. Greg, Crystal, everyone, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So happy to have you, Greg. Thanks for being with us today.
This has been a conversation a long time coming. When we first spoke, I think it was back in October or November. And my friend Lucas Evans with E3 Agriculture connected us. And I was very inspired by the work that you're doing. You practice corporate and transactional law in Houston, but you have a rural upbringing. So farming and ranching and supporting generational landowners is near and dear to your heart. So I would love to start off by learning a little bit about your East Texas raising.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna and Crystal, for having me. And yeah, I do have a unique story. My family is from East Texas, Houston County, specifically Grapeland, Texas. I think Grapeland now has 1,465 people in it. Both my mother and father are from Grapeland. So my whole family, everything about Greg Phillips is from East Texas. Interesting story. Both my mother and father grew up as sharecroppers. They lived on, initially my father's family lived on a sharecropping farm, but they moved when he was young. And then my mother actually stayed, her and her family, her and 6 siblings stayed quite a bit of time. So I hear them often talk about, or I hear my mother, she's still alive, talk about when she picked cotton or when she was young on the Murr farm when they were sharecroppers. So that's my family's upbringing. I was raised in Houston, but I would spend every summer in Grapeland. I would spend every holiday in Grapeland. So my makeup is East Texas. By background, as I grew up, I tried to run away from my roots and get as far away from being a country bumpkin from East Texas as possible. I did. I went to hoity-toity schools and got engineering degree from SMU in Dallas. I got a law degree from University of Texas and thought I was really getting away from my country roots and tried to run from my country roots. I mean, I literally know what an outhouse is and I know what drinking out of a well is. But as I've gotten older, I wish I could move to the country, but my wife won't do it. So my country roots is what has made me. And if you want, I can get into kind of how I've gotten into this whole land issue, or we can talk about it later.
No, I would love that because we're the same way. I mean, we were born in West Texas and raised on our family's land. We're 5th generation. And we had this thought that we would be there. We would do something with the land, but our parents were pushing us away. Like, you don't want this life. I don't want this life for you. And so now, I'm in my late 40s. Crystal is in her early 50s. And now we're brand new farmers trying to figure this out. So there wasn't this lifelong learning that was happening. It's just been at this point in our lives like, whoa, something's got to happen. There hasn't really been succession planning. I mean, they've made plans, like my dad and his brothers have made plans, but it hasn't been inclusive of everyone in the family, all the stakeholders, if you will, all of the heirs. So I would love for you to jump into that because I know that we are not the only ones.
No, it is a We've just had a pandemic or epidemic, but this issue is a pandemic in America, where you have maybe, I would call them, I use the word limited resource families, right? Not rich folk, right? Regular folk who may own property and they don't have the knowledge or the wherewithal to do succession planning, estate planning. It's just not something you sit around the breakfast table talking about. Let's plan our estate, And so, what happens when families like that have land and the elders pass away, you have some issues with heirs property and all kinds of issues. But my story, very similar to you guys, is my understanding is that we're probably fifth or sixth generation landowners and for our land with 220 acres, not contiguous, but in Houston County, 100 acres in one spot, 120 acres in another spot. I heard the story from my father and his brothers that they helped their uncle work the land, work the cows when they were boys. I did the same thing when I was a young boy. My dad's father got killed in World War II. So my dad, there were three boys and three girls. They grew up in East Texas, and their uncle, J.T. Hicks, owned this land, and that was their mother's brother. So they grew up working the land. So I come along with my cousins. I grew up doing the same thing, helping with the cattle, fixing fences, baling hay. I did all that growing up. When my uncle passed away, and I understand this property has been in our family over 120 years, when he passed away, he left the land to his two children. One was an opera singer in New York, and the other was a nurse in Corpus Christi. And my father and his brothers, they got nervous that over time their cousins would sell the land. So they came to me, and by this time I'm a corporate lawyer. That's what I do. I'm a corporate securities lawyer in Houston, working in big law firms, big companies. Again, running away from my country roots. And they said, Greg, we want to purchase this land from our cousins. Can you help us figure that out? Me being a corporate lawyer, knowing how to structure transactions, I said, sure, we probably should form a family partnership, and we all own equity in the entity. Let the entity buy the land, and it sits under the entity, and explaining to my father and my uncles that what will happen over time as people pass away, if the interest in the partnership would roll up to one person, and it always would stay in the family. Most people don't have a corporate securities lawyer in their family. Most people don't have someone to help them structure things that way. Well, we were blessed. We did. We had me. We bought that property in 1996. Me, my dad, his two brothers, and one of my mother's brothers. So there are five of us in the partnership. Over the years, from 1996 to now, my dad has passed away. One of his brothers has passed away. His younger brother just said, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I've got health issues. Greg, here's my interest. My mother gave me her interest. I purchased an interest from an uncle. And I have one holdout uncle who's still around. He owns 20%. I own 80% of the partnership. We own the 220 acres. When I got the 80%, because I'm a lawyer in Houston running from my country roots, I was about to sell the property. I was like, I don't have time to deal with cows and cattle, and the cows are out on a Tuesday because a storm has come through, knocked the fence down, and I'm getting calls at 3 a.m. in the morning, your cows are out. So I'm like, enough of this. I'm just going to sell it. I had a cousin he was an older cousin who said, Greg, that land is gold. Let me introduce you to some people who deal with land. And anyways, he introduced me to him. I got involved, started learning about land ownership. And I started learning about the plight of limited resource landowners, how land gets stolen from them. They don't pay the taxes. It gets taken in tax foreclosure, all kinds of shenanigans. I got involved with Texas A&M and Prairie View A&M, and just, again, land utilization, land resources. And I started learning about all kinds of ways to use land. And it dawned on me that I would be an idiot to sell this land. And instead of selling the land, let's figure out ways where that land fits my needs as an absentee owner. And that was probably 5 or 6 years ago, guys. And it is my passion to help people keep their land and figure out how to utilize that land and make it a resource. I ended up we planted 40,000 loblolly pine trees through the USDA's EQIP program on about 85 acres. Here's the interesting thing is that, my wife's a city girl. My kids really didn't care about the land. Well, the timber value of those 40,000 loblolly pine trees in today's timber value is $100 a tree. So you do $100 multiplied times 40,000 and you do the math. Now, for some reason, my wife is very interested in this tree farm in Grapeland. How are the trees? My three kids, 2 live in DC, one's here in Houston. How's the land? How are the trees? My son is up there actually today with his family. He's pressure washing some things for me. He's got his own pressure washing business. They're very interested in the land. So I learned if you make this land valuable for the next generation, now they have a reason for keeping it. And they have a reason for finding value in it, and it stays in the family over time. So that's setting up for all the work I'm doing now we can talk about, but that's my story.
I love that. And I appreciate your commitment to helping others along with your family. This is where Crystal and I came from as we're figuring out, like, well, shoot, nobody else in our family is stepping up and is saying they want to farm and ranch. But, our family had sold 10,000 acres of the ranch to get out of debt and make sure that we were flush before someone else passes away. But we have 5,000 acres left, and we're like, we don't want any more of that to go away. How do we preserve this 5,000 acres? And how do we do this with our family where everybody's in agreement? And as we are thinking about this stuff, we just were like, wait a minute, there's so many farms and ranches that are owned by families that are losing them. So whatever we learn, we want to share with everyone else. And so I appreciate that is also your commitment. And the limited resource landowner thing, like the struggle is real. All of the money is tied up in the land, or you might have some money tied up in equipment. And, you mentioned the absentee landowner. The thing that I'm finding on the other side of that is finding folks to do the work. So the one struggle is, how do you create the entity that everyone agrees on? But then also, how do you find land stewards that are willing to do the work? And it almost feels like the sharecropping thing you talked about in the beginning. How do we create a modern day sharecropping situation?
So, Joanna, here's where my city life and my country life collide, right? So, as I started off, I'm a 34-year practicing corporate transactional lawyer. I have done deals I used to work at Bracewell, which is a big law firm in Houston. I was the 18th lawyer at Compaq Computer Corporation, which was a fast growing Fortune 25 company. I've done deals all over the world. I bought companies. I built plants for Compaq. You fall out of your seat now. I left Compaq. I was an Enron lawyer. I worked at Enron post bankruptcy, 3.5 years, putting all of their international corporate assets into a company called Prisma. We sold that to a private equity firm, and I'm saying all this for a reason. Private equity firm in London for $4 billion to make Enron money for the Enron estate. And then I've started my own law firm. I've had 2 law firms. I do deals, right? I have clients all over the world. I've done all kinds of complex transactions. The point is that there are opportunities. You mentioned ag. People think of land, ag, timber, and ranching. Okay, that's the traditional. But there are all kinds of uses of land that go beyond that. Okay, you talked about how do you make it valuable, absentee landowners. I am working with some of my clients and relationships that I've developed over the years through all these big deals who are very interested in land. I've learned that, number one, for example, I'm working with a client right now. If I could find land that works, they are looking to put AI, artificial intelligence, data centers, because AI needs a lot of power, right? So they're either looking for power sources, land that has access to natural gas, or land that has even solar farms, hydrogen plants to generate power to build their AI data centers. And they have a mobile data center where they can bring it on a truck that looks like an 18-wheeler. They're looking for land to build power sources to basically generate their data centers. They're out of Canada. They're looking for that today. And so it take the concept of oil and gas where landowners have land, the oil and gas developer comes on the land and they drill for oil, they find oil. What do? They lease the land from the landowner and they write them a royalty check. Does the landowner have to have the expertise to drill? No. The landowner has the land and they bring in the expert, right? To basically do the deal or do whatever, and the landowner just collects a check. Take that same concept with power generation. Take that same concept with alternative wood. Here's an example. You ever the new barbecue pits that have those little wood pellets? Well, the issue is they need tonnage of kind of debris, and there's no infrastructure to take 5 tons of that stuff to these guys that make those wood pellets. What if you had a producer who had a business that found those wood pellets and had land like y'all's 5,000 acres, not looking for big diameter trees for timber, but looking for all your crap stuff, right? And they can pile it up and take it to those pellet wood producers. Landowner, you just get a check for what comes off your property. I've learned about bee pollination. I never knew this existed, where people send 18-wheeler truckloads of bees to California to the almond groves and the apple groves and the cherry groves to pollinate those things. And I was like, well, what happens when the bees go out there in California and they pollinate? How do they get back? And the person looked at me like, duh, it's a beehive. They come back to the hive and they ship them back. Well, here's the issue. The bees go off and work. Some of them die and they thin out. When they come back, these bee pollinators, they can't afford to buy 5,000 acres, but they need more land to replenish their beehives. What if they could lease it from you guys, pay you, like a royalty check for some of this? They need land. They can't afford to buy 5,000 acres. That's another use. Hunting leases. There are more people looking, they can't afford to buy land. And Texas is getting squeezed because private land is hard to find a hunt on. What if just set up a forum to where online hunters can find landowners willing to lease their land for hunting? I can go on and on with alternative land usage where the owner of the land does not have to be the producer. All you've got to provide is the land and let the land work for you in your sleep and collect a check. The model is oil and gas. You can set that up. So bring those to, I can go on and on, but you make Lucas about industrial hemp. That's a whole nother story. So if you start thinking about these alternative land uses and we start building a model where the landowner can provide that black gold land for producers who need it, and Mr. and Mrs. Landowner, you don't have to work the land. You just collect a check.
Nowadays, finding time for in real life connection is a challenge in and of itself. So, I talked to Crystal about a modern spin on the classic farmers co op, and we'd be delighted if you join us. The concept is pretty simple: give $5, receive support. You donate $5 or more per month and gain access to the Texas Soil Sisters Co op monthly online meetup. This is a private but open dialogue where you can bring questions and receive support from our growing community. Maybe it's questions about industrial hemp production, or you're looking for land, or maybe a land steward, or connecting with alternative land use opportunities. Maybe you're in the beginning stage of off ramping from conventional ag like we are. We love passing along the powerful education we're receiving and helping other soil sisters and misters like you find solutions. So, if you're a gardener, land steward, farmer, rancher, or limited resource landowner, you're invited to join us on our monthly co op call with your donation. Sign up at txsoilsisters.co/grow. These monthly meetings are not recorded. They take place on the third Monday of every month at 6 p.m. Central Time. Sign up at txsoilsisters.co/grow. So, when you're saying that, of course, the thing about AI and data centers as a soil sister. It kind of made me cringe, but I get it. I totally get
Yeah.
it.
You got to think out of the box.
Yes.
Not cattle, not ag.
Yeah.
So then my next question is, what is this matchmaking process between the landowners and these businesses?
So part of my effort, you mentioned me kind of giving back and working. Part of my effort is working with the U.S. and organizations like the U.S. Endowment, working with organizations like the Center for Heirs Property Preservation out of South Carolina. And one thing we're working on is potentially getting infrastructure and resources to start putting a plan and the infrastructure in place, right? So here's the issue. Landowners need to be educated about all these opportunities, right? Because most landowners think of timber, ag, and cattle, right, in Texas, and don't think about all these other alternative land uses. Again, this is coming from my experience as a corporate lawyer. I have clients that do AI. I have clients that build solar farms. And so, it's me. Okay, maybe it is a little bit odd, but I'm in the middle of all this. Why can't I put all these two together? But working with organizations, maybe to have resources where we can go out now and build an infrastructure. Mr. and Mrs. Landowner, you don't have to do this on your own. Here's the infrastructure. Here's the organization. We found the producers that need your land. We're going to educate you on these opportunities. These are trusted resources, right? Because that's the key. You've got to have trusted people, not just anybody. We've vetted them. They're trusted. Here's a structure that works. Put it all together. All you need to do is walk in the door and insert yourself and your land into it. Here's one big problem, though. These producers, bee pollination guys, the hemp producers, a lot of those guys are struggling. They don't have the capital, right? And they're smaller operators, and they're trying to build their businesses, but they have knowledge. I think on that side, you've got to bring private equity to the table to help those guys build their infrastructure so that they can utilize all this land we're going to bring to them. So you've got to create a complete ecosystem that works. So I am talking to some of my clients who are private equity guys. You mentioned Lucas. He has some private equity resources that may be interested in this area. So you've got to build it all. You've got to have private equity to help the producers, and then you've got to educate and build an infrastructure where it works for the landowners. That's the work to be done. That's what I'm working on.
So you mentioned U.S. Endowment and working with the Heirs Property Initiative. I know that there was grant money that had been applied for. I know things were supposed to start getting rolling in first quarter. Where are you with all of that?
All right. So you're making me, since we launched yesterday, I can talk about it because I probably
perfect timing.
It is perfect timing. I would have gotten fussed at if I would have talked about it too soon. So let me give some history. As I got involved in this work years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, as I said, and I was doing it all pro bono, right? Really, I created, me being a lawyer, Prairie View A&M with the American Forestry Foundation, the Sustainable Forestry Land Initiative. Prairie View got a $300,000 grant from the American Forestry Foundation to educate, really back then, Black landowners, right, about land utilization and sustainable forestry. And they asked me if I'd put together a legal workshop about heirs property, because it's a big problem for limited resource landowners not doing succession planning. I started doing that, and this is during COVID, right? I started doing these webinars about, I'm not a wills and estates lawyer. I was dangerous enough to do a 20-minute presentation on what is heirs property, and I still do it. That's about it. I stopped there. And I started doing these for American Forestry Foundation in Prairie View and Texas A&M. They were involved. And, I would do these probably 2 a quarter, and over these about 3 years. As I said, I'm a corporate lawyer. I'm not a wills and estates lawyer. After I do these presentations, I would get these calls from landowners with, hey, can you help us with these horror stories, right, on their land and what's happened, and they lost the land. I mean, literally, I would have tears in my eyes with some of these families calling me, and I couldn't do anything because I don't know anything about going to court and suing to clean title. So I started doing research, and I found what's the Center for Heirs Property Preservation in South Carolina. They have been around over 20 years, and basically they've been doing this work to work with landowners to clean up heirs property issues for 20 years. They're a nonprofit, fully staffed with over 60 people on their staff. They have lawyers on staff, paralegals. So I reached out to them, and they were so kind. They took my call. They listened to me. And we started having these periodic calls because I was like, we have a pandemic in Texas with this stuff. And I built a relationship. And then I talked to my friend who's a professor, John Cooper at Texas A&M. And John used to sit on the board of U.S. Endowment, American Forestry Foundation. He's a bigwig in this area. He said, Greg, I know them. I know them well. I know Jenny, Jenny Stevens, the executive director. And I was like, John, boy, I wish you would have told me a long time ago. It would have saved me some grief. But anyways, he connected us. And long story short, after about 3.5 years of working on this, the Center for Heirs Property said, we will come to Texas. They actually wrote a grant to get USDA funding and additional funding that was awarded probably about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago. They got an $8 million grant. $3 million is going to be used for other projects, but $5 million of that $8 million over the next 3 years will be used to implement a pilot program in East Texas. It's called the East Texas Heirs Property Initiative. We're taking everything that CHIP, Center for Heirs Property Preservation, has done in South Carolina, and they're just bringing their McDonald's blueprint to Texas. We've already got staff, we've got lawyers, we've got paralegals, we've got an executive director. The idea is to tackle heirs property in Texas. It's focused on a 12-county area in East Texas, but it will take additional projects outside of that. But we just launched it yesterday. They flew, everyone flew in from South Carolina and all over. We had representatives from USDA, U.S. Endowment, and we actually launched here in Houston officially yesterday. So it's launched. We've been working on it.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And it's live. We're going out to work here in Texas. It's a pilot program, and the idea is that it's sponsored by CHIP, CHPP, but over time it's got to have legs and run on its own. But CHIP is the sponsor. It's officially a CHPP, Center for Heirs Property Preservation project, and it's got its own staff here in East Texas. I'm on the advisory board, right? That's gone on its own. My focus now that we've gotten that going, all right, now if we can clean up title and we get land, let's go put it to use to make money to create generational wealth. So that's the story.
So I looked on the website, and it looks like it says there's 3 areas of focus: prevention, resolution, and then sustainable land use. So I'm assuming prevention is, okay, how do we stop the bleeding? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen anymore? Resolution, cleaning up situations for families that are on the verge of potentially losing their land. Is that correct?
That's correct, Joanna. You hit those 2 points dead on.
Okay, so then the sustainable land use, you're doing educational and technical assistance. Tell me how the vision is for that to play out.
Good question. So that's kind of the third piece that is now, that's my focus, right? So traditionally land use, and again, this is not knocking anybody, but traditionally land use has been thinking of ag, timber, and cattle ranching, right? And most of the focus of even Center for Heirs Property Preservation in the past has been forestry, right? Because that's been a big thought of land utilization, forestry, which makes sense, right? Timber and forestry. And then, of course, ag and cattle are the 2 traditional ones. So that's been the focus in the past. The big work, and we're not there. It's not figured out. That's the work we're working on, is alternative land use, right? Technology, right? You shuddered when I said AI, but it's coming, right? Whether we like it or not, it's coming in. This is the world's change. I've got to look at AI I've been practicing corporate law 34 years. Me and my partner are figuring out how do we incorporate AI into our practice. It's coming, right? You pick up the phone.
But as we just learned from China, it doesn't have to be as clunky as what Americans' technology is. So hopefully we don't have to use too much land for that.
I agree. And my point is, I don't care what anybody's thoughts are. It's here. It's coming. You drive a car, You got to push buttons for them. It's coming. So my point is, and I'm not advocating technology. I'm advocating land use, right?
Hmm.
It's coming. If there's a way to utilize land to build generational wealth for families and keep those, because the younger generation is not going to be interested in this land just because of grandpa and grandma's stories about how they grew up on it. No, these kids want to know what's in it for me. So make it something that's in it for them. And so land utilization, you have to get that next generation interested. Just like my kids and my wife are now interested in our land because of trees. They see the timber value. So whether it's AI, alternative wood use, hemp production, bee pollination, hunting, whatever, put that land to use so that now that land is valuable and it's not a burden. So that's what we're working on now, trying to develop. Remember, I mentioned that ecosystem, the infrastructure, to where here's a program, your land, Joanna and Crystal, your land is perfect for bee pollination. We've sent the experts out there, they've looked at it, they love your land. So we've already got the infrastructure set up. Joanna and Crystal, you don't have to do any hard work. All you have to do is sign a lease or sign a production agreement or whatever that says you're going to get X number of dollars a month. And from what's produced off your property, you're going to keep X percentage of the revenue. Here's your check. Which you don't have to go learn how to do it. That's the idea. That's taking that concept from oil and gas, whatever the best use of your land is, and inserting it in. Now you've got a check. Your land is being used. Your kids and grandkids look forward to those checks. That land stays in the family forever. That's what we're working on.
I love that model based around the ideas that we're moving forward with. But this is absolutely what we need, is a structure for that. And we've got some ideas for some grants that we're talking about writing. And this is exactly what we need. But it's within our Soil Sisters wheelhouse rather than some of those other uses. But it's brilliant and it's perfect. So I appreciate hearing more about this.
So Crystal, let me see, this is where I got to watch it. We're not there yet. I'm going to jump ahead. So I may get beat up and I'm going to say it's all y'all's fault.
I'll take it. No problem.
Say it's Crystal's and Joanna's fault. So part of the work, right? We're taking kind of a strategic staged approach. And this is where I've kind of, Joanna, I know I've talked to you before and even Lucas. I said, give us some time because we're trying to build the infrastructure. We're working to create another nonprofit entity, right? That will have staff that can work on this full time, that will work with the Lucases of the world, right? And say, Lucas, you're producer. Let's develop a structure and identify the type of land you need, and you're ready to go. When we bring our landowners, you're ready to take that land and go do your thing, right? Or the bee pollinator person, to work with them to develop the entire structure on how this is going to work, and they're vetted and they have the program ready to go. And then once we do that, then we have this nonprofit that is educating, talking to landowners. Again, landowners got to trust this system. So you want everything set up where landowners, it's a one-stop shop, right? Again, make it easy for the landowners. We're not asking you to be the expert. Here's the ecosystem. Here's where everybody who does this, where they're all in one place, they're vetted, they're trusted sources. You got the land, come on in, you're educated, match up with Lucas, your land is good for hemp. He does it. He's already agreed that he's going to lease your land for X. We already have the documents done. He already agreed that he's going to give you a percentage of the profits. It's all there. And so we have a nonprofit that part of our request with the U.S. Endowment, they've got an issue in RFP, is that nonprofit is going to start working on that, using part of that funding and the staff to start working on the infrastructure. By the way, CHIP, Center for Heirs Property Preservation, out of the kindness of their heart, they have already given us a full-time land utilization specialist that should start first quarter. She's moving from South Carolina. She's moving to Lufkin. We're already going to start doing some of this through CHIP's kindness, through part of their funding. So that's what we're doing. That's the idea. So that nonprofit hopefully should be formed and ready to go, I'm hoping, by second quarter. But Crystal, this is where I should get you and John Cooper, who's my buddy from A&M, who's helping me with all this. We should probably all get together and work together so that we're not all disparately working out there.
I love it.
Yes, and that is the piece where I see the Soil Sisters coming into this, is because we are developing relationships with farmers and ranchers and landowners around the state and really the country. But, our goal is focusing here in Texas. But they're like, I have 80 acres in this county and I need somebody to do something with it. I've got 16 acres here, 5 acres here. And they're asking us for help to activate that land. And so my thing is like, okay, I worked for a matchmaking firm for 4 years. I know how to do this, but
All right.
it's like they're the missing pieces. So
Yeah.
whenever I was introduced to you, it just felt really good and synergistic. So I'm excited about how this can play out.
I agree.
So right now, what are the next steps?
So one thing that we were really, again, I hope I can say this on the podcast. I hope I don't get in trouble. U.S. Endowment was very good. They were very good. They actually gave us their consulting firm to work with to build our strategy on this alternative land utilization. So we probably spent about 6 months working with their consulting firm to basically do a white paper, to think it through. And the idea was, I think the U.S. Endowment was supposed to release their RFP, right, for this grant this quarter. Well, with the changes, right, in the administration and all, I don't think it's gone away, but I think it's been delayed. So we're waiting for that RFP to be released, and then we apply for the grant, and then hopefully it works out, and then we're off and running. And so I've been telling Joanna, people to, like Lucas and yourself even, hey, hold off, because we need to get this entity and this grant done so that we have the infrastructure and resources to run, right? Because right now it's an idea, and we're trying to get it beyond an idea to a real deal. And so my hope is by second quarter this year, we're running, right? But I think Joanna and Crystal, we're so close. I think it's probably time for us to talk. Probably may even set up a meeting with me, you, and John Cooper, who's really helping me with all this from A&M, to really start talking, because I think it's coming, right? 2Q. So I think we're there. And probably all need to put our heads together. One thing I want to mention too that I don't want us to lose sight of, and I think you guys, and I know like people like Lucas have resources. As we're talking on the land owner and kind of these working with organizations like the U.S. Endowment to do all this nonprofit work, which is the meat of this. A big component I think we all have to keep in mind is on the private equity side, right? We've got to find capital and resources for people like Lucas Evans, right? Because to do their thing, right? A lot of those guys have the knowledge, for example, of hemp production. Someone I know, she has the knowledge of bee pollination, but in order to scale her operations and Lucas's operations, they need private equity, right? Because if we're going to bring all this land and capability and say, wow, here's thousands of acres to go do your thing, they don't have the capital to go handle that. So at the same time, we're doing all this great work on the nonprofit side. We've got to talk to the private sector to build good businesses to take advantage of what we're going to bring to the table. So we're going to need capital and private equity investors to capitalize these producers. So that's a key part of this. And that's the world I live in. But I just want to mention that all this has to work together.
And that's part of what we have talked about so much, is getting private money into small farms, like getting the people in the cities invested in their food and where that food comes from. So I think that goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do as well.
And Crystal, that, a lot of, I tell, and this is where what I do, right? I say I make my living. I represent private equity companies. And like I said, I may be an anomaly, bringing this, because I grew, East Texas is me, and hoity-toity Houston is me, and around the world. But I'm not saying do things out of the kindness of your heart. It's capital, right? If these investors can make money, they're going to put their money in. And so we're not saying this is a nonprofit, do it out of the kindness of your heart. We're talking about building businesses, right, on these producer side, the hemp production, the bee pollination, that are going to make money for you, Mr. Investor, and you're going to get a return. So no, make it work for everyone.
Well, and you can make things work and it going from the kindness of your heart, but also making you a profit. There's companies
Yes.
right now like Maker's Mark who has invested and said, okay, we are only going to be using corn and wheat in our Maker's Mark that comes from regeneratively farmed wheat and corn. And so they
Yep.
are now paying for the farms that they work with to go through the Regenified program because farmers are like, yeah, that sounds great, I want to do that, but they can't afford to foot the bill to get themselves Regenified
That's right.
certified. So
That's right.
finding private equity that also has a heart, that also
Yep.
recognizes that topsoil is our most endangered species. So how can we make this work for our bottom line, but also for the world?
Joanna, you're dead on. I'll give you. I mean, I've learned more about. I didn't know anything about it, but I've learned more about industrial hemp production from Lucas and another contact, Derek Mohammed, and so he's got 2,000 acres, and he is everything industrial hemp. And so my whole thinking of industrial hemp was all this CBD stuff and all that, and that's why
Mhm.
most people don't want to deal with. And these guys have educated me and said, you know what, Greg, that's separate. That's not industrial hemp. We're talking about industrial hemp. And they said that's completely separate. And I think the world thinks of hemp as being just one big pile of stuff. It's separate. They said, Greg, industrial hemp is a different strain. It's a different stalk. It's tough. Rope Navy buys most of it. It's rope industrial hemp. China produces 80% of industrial hemp production almost. And even to where our Navy buys its rope from China. That's not
This
good.
is
And then
exactly.
I've been educated. So my eyes are open. I have a call every week with these guys, and I'm learning more about industrial hemp. So you're talking about companies that want to invest right in topsoil. So they were telling me, Derek Mohammed in South Carolina was saying that he could make a lot of hemp for Patagonia. Patagonia uses hemp in its
Mhm.
clothes. Nike uses hemp in its shoes, its tennis shoes. He also explained that BMW and Volkswagen uses hemps in its visors, right? For his visors, the plastic. Hemp is used to make walls. I'm sitting here like, what? And so, but the problem that he has, and people like Lucas here in Texas, because of legislation, everybody dumps it into the CBD stuff, that they don't have the capacity to manufacture it, right? They can grow it, but they can't produce it to make enough for the needs of these big companies. What if you had investors that said, okay, Lucas and Derek, we're going to build a hemp production facility in Texas or South Carolina. So you go grow as much as you can, bring it to us, and you can produce this stuff in volume and go sell it to enough to Patagonia and Nike. But the problem is that these guys like Lucas and Derek, they don't have the capital to go build a large hemp production facility in South Carolina and Texas. If you had investors that understood and were educated on the business and the industry, perhaps you could get the funding for those guys. And once you get those guys up and going, guess what, Mr. Landowner? They need as much land as you can bring them to grow hemp.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's an example.
Well, and we actually now do have the second largest hemp processing facility in the world located in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Yeah.
And I just finished brokering a deal with a company who is making different kinds of glue for different industries that needed bulk sourcing of hemp. And so I connected them with Panda Biotech, who's like, we can provide 20 tons of hemp pellets to them a week if that's what they need. And they're like, okay, let's get started. So there are things like that that are starting to play out in this market. And I think it's just going to take people seeing that it's real and it's actually happening and that it is changing industry for this particular client. They'll be able to use what they're producing in the cosmetic industry, in the construction industry, in the fire prevention industry. And it's variations of one simple, I call it simple. I wasn't there when they developed it, but one formulation that they were able to nudge in different ways and accommodate three different industries. from one
Oh,
plant.
that's
Like
awesome.
the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. It's just really about the imagination of people that are doing business now.
Yep. And Jenna, that's a great example on your client. If they're growing and they need more resources, more land to do their thing, to grow their type of hemp. Again, if we could insert our limited resource landowners, hey, I got
Mhm.
80 acres, or I'm absentee, I'm not there, and hey, take it and grow your thing. I mean, it's just you got to build that infrastructure and that ecosystem where it's working.
I think the one thing that I think about with these contracts that I want to make sure is talked about or included whenever we're developing these contracts is like, this is the state of this land. And this is the requirements. We're willing to do business with you, but it's in honoring our ecosystem that already exists and making sure that the land doesn't get raped and pillaged like a lot has happened with those oil and gas contracts.
And you know what? Land utilization and conservation has evolved, right? We've learned a lot from, again, I have learned so much working with Center for Heirs Property Preservation. They do a lot of work. One of their cohorts is a group, and I can't remember the name, out of Appalachia. Just think about it, coal mines, same
Mhm.
issue. People have gotten their land pillaged from coal mines over the years. And yeah, there's been a lot of work in contracts to preserve the land and conserve the land and let it be used for these industrial purposes. So, good point. And there's a way to design these contracts to make sure the land is preserved. A lot of effort has gone into that.
Well, this is very exciting stuff that you have going on, and we're excited to be a part of it in, whatever way, shape, or form that we can. I think our hearts are in the same place. So,
Yes.
if people want to follow along on this journey, see what's happening, if they are families in East Texas, where can they learn more about this stuff?
I think the Center for Heirs Property Preservation website has a link. I think you said you looked at it, Joanna, the East Texas Heirs Property Initiative link. That's a start,
Okay.
right?
I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. I don't remember
Yeah,
exactly
we
what it is.
launched yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, put it in because we launched yesterday, so it's all official now. That's a start, right? And I think they can get information on the efforts in East Texas. On the land utilization, I think starting there is a good one. On the land utilization, there's some discussion there about it. The word is we're in the infancy, right, for that organization and what we're doing there. It's coming. Give us some time, but it's coming. But I think start with the chip site and the East Texas Heirs Property Initiative because those of us that have been involved in getting that off the ground are some of the same people now that are working on the alternative land uses. So that's a good start.
Okay.
Even the same players, and that's a good way to get in touch with everyone.
And so for somebody who their family did want to get involved, like, what is required of the family to start?
Now, this is for land utilization
Yeah.
or heirs property or any
Yeah,
all the above,
both of those really, like, just
right?
knowing we need to do something. What do we
Yeah,
do? Like, what's required to get involved?
I think, well, there's an intake process for the East Texas Heirs Property Initiative. When you go to the site, I think it's got the information. You can call, or you can even, I think, send an email. There's a whole intake process. Again, Chip's been doing this over 20 years. So they got it down, right? We had to Texasize all their stuff
Yeah.
coming from South Carolina, but they've got it down. So there's an intake process. We've got admin people, paralegals, or even the lawyer may even take the call, and they'll talk to the family and have an initial call. That's part of it, and then there's a whole intake process to see if the family. One thing I'll say is that the project for East Texas Heirs Property Initiative, it does not do family disputes, right? It does not do. You want to sell your land. No, this is cleaning. It's the family has to be in agreement that they're trying to find a solution to clean up the heirs property issue, right? So the families have to be together. So that's one. And I think there's also, and I don't know the details. I think there's an income requirement. We're working on that because part of the problem is I think South Carolina income requirements are a little bit different than Houston. You can't make more than a certain amount of money. If you make a lot of money, you can go hire your own lawyer, right?
Right.
This is for
Exactly.
people that may have limited resources. So it's really trying to help those that don't have anywhere else to go. And so there's an intake process, and it's pretty well defined. So you go to the site, get the information, and you can take off from there.
The key thing that I just heard you say is that the family needs to all be on the same page.
Yeah,
If your
yeah,
family's not on
yeah,
the same page, you need to get there before you can
that's
get
correct.
started.
That is correct. It is not a family mediation center. That's the family has to be on.
Yeah, that cost a lot more money for me to have to do that for somebody.
Oh yeah,
That's the work of a
that's
lifetime.
that's a different ball game. Yeah, that's social work.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Well, Greg,
Yeah, but it's there. It's
is there anything that we didn't ask you that's important for this conversation?
Yes. What I would tell the public is don't think like I originally thought, right? I'm too busy, or I'm trying to be something different and run away from my roots in this land. Land is something that there's not going to be any more of it made. Families that have land, it's a valuable resource. Keep it in your family. Do not lose it. Do not get rid of it. The idea is if you're unsure on what to do with it, figure it out. Help is coming. Keep your land. And then once you keep it, figure out how to make your land work for you and think out of the box. It's not always the old ways of utilizing land. There's more than cattle, there's more than timber, there's more than ag. Don't get me wrong. Those are wonderful. Those are wonderful things to, if you know how to do it and it's working, that's great. But there are alternative land uses that are coming. They're on the horizon that you don't have to be the expert. Hold on to that land. So that's the key. I mean, I am an example of someone who's been converted to be passionate about limited resource landowners keeping their land. And now I'm passionate about alternative land uses because I think there's gold out there.
Yeah.
And I just want to say most landowners are limited use. When I think of farmers and ranchers, I don't know any of them that are rolling in it and are able to just do all the things that need to be done or could be done on their land. They're just doing what they can to get by. And that is what Soil Sisters is wanting to help do, is to help people look at things differently and introduce different verticals that they can. Of course, ours, and it's so funny because it's not, and the old way of doing things is actually the new way of doing things. And we want to get back to the true old way of doing things, which is
Yep.
regeneratively, without chemicals, with all that kind of stuff. So I am really excited about the framework and the ecosystem that y'all are creating because I think it's going to benefit a lot of people in a lot of ways, because there are folks who say, I have land and I want someone to farm it regeneratively, but I don't want to do that. And
Yep.
so that's who we are trying to connect with those people so that the land has the land steward that will match that and do what they want and what the landowner wants. So
Crystal, I am all in, and I'm all in to work with the Soil Sisters. And I think, now that we're matching up and meeting, guys, we have a lot of great work that we're gonna do, and we're thinking the same. We're all on the same page, and now it's time to get this going.
yes.
I love it. And this whole thing of, it's not just about making money, it's maximizing the income, like
Right.
generational wealth. This is
Right.
the old idea of family land. We were talking about it with our dad the other day. I'm like, why was it the idea and the concept to being like, well, now there's three of you, so we're going to split the land three ways. And then you have three kids, so now your part gets split three ways. I'm like, you're just splintering something to where it has no values. Like
Right.
the thought of keeping it all together and making it one powerful unit, to me, just is a no-brainer.
And there's ways to do it, Joanna. And then, like I said, what I did with my dad and my uncles. I mean, it's under a family partnership. That entity is going to be there. If I pass away, my interest goes into my estate, so it's going to be there. So there's ways to do it, guys, and yeah, we can do this.
Yay.
Outstanding. Well, Greg, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate who you are and what you're doing, and excited about the future of farming and ranching and alternative land uses here in Texas.
And I'm so happy to know that there's some East Texas country boy who's a big time attorney in Houston that we can connect with on a deeper level. It means a lot to know that there are people who honor and appreciate their roots that are trying to perpetuate that for other people as well.
I am true East Texas. My kids tell me, they said, Dad, when you go to East Texas, your whole dialect changes.
Yes.
I've actually have a client that is, they have property. He's a client here in Houston, but he has property in Crockett, East Texas. And first time his wife met me, I had just gotten off a deer stand, and I met them at their house, and I was in my dad's 1995 Chevy Z71 truck. So I looked like an East Texas country boy. I think I even had some deer blood on me. And so she met me there, right? And then I actually met her I went to a funeral, a mutual friend's funeral here in Houston, where I looked like the lawyer. I had a suit on, and she was like, "Whoa, you changed. You look different." So I am true East Texas, but I'm also a true city boy. So like I said, I may be an anomaly.
I love it.
Well, we appreciate your unique being in this space.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out.
Much.
Connect with the Soil Sisters at txsoilsisters.co. Submit questions, guest or show ideas, and sponsorship inquiries. The Soil Sisters podcast was created and produced by Joanna Nuding. Editing and sound design are in the capable hands of the PodConnects Podcast Network.